originated it. It's a stonefly pattern, and it's really good this time of year. Matter of fact, cold water, cold winter weather, this seems to be one of the better flies. It's real good on Allegheny River. It's good on Oil Creek, and those are actually the only two places I've ever really fished it. But it's sometimes productive, low and slow. You get it down, especially in the winter weather. You got to keep it low, on as close to the bottom as possible, and slow. So there's several. Excuse me. There's several different ways to tie it. One is with a bead head, and one was without a bead head. So for this purpose, I'm just going to do one first without the bead, and because I want to make sure that everybody understands. When we start this fly, we're going to start. You must leave some room behind the eye. Don't crowd your eye, because when it comes to finishing off this fly, there's two steps right at the very end that if you crowded the eye, it's going to be a mess and it's not going to work. So first thing we're going to do is put on some wire, and I'm going to weight this with about 10 or 12 wraps of 0.015 wire. And you mush that together. And it's cold in here and my fingers aren't working. We have to get Daryl to come earlier, like at 6 o'clock, start the fire. So you center that wire about a third of the way back. Then what we're going to do is put on our tying thread, start that behind the eye, put a little bit of a thread dam at the front, tighten up that wire, get behind that wire and build another thread dam. Then what you can do is you can wrap over that wire, and that locks it in place. Maybe back just a little bit further. And bring your wire all the way to or your thread, excuse me, we're done with wire. All the way to just where it's starting to go down the bend. And the next step is what we're going to do is we're going to put a little bit of a dubbing ball on the back. We're going to put that in place because we're going to use that to separate the back legs. So you do a small noodle. This isn't going to work. I have to get my Band-Aid off. Hopefully we don't end up with a red fly. You don't make that too awful big, just a little bit of a noodle, and build a ball. And we're going to use that to separate the legs, which will be goose biots. And these are slippery as the dickens, so you got to be careful when you cut these off or pull them off. They're liable to fly all over your tying bench. You separate them. Easier to say than to do. It's not working. My fingers aren't working either. There we go. want to set these feathers so that they splay outwards. And you can do this one of two ways. You can set each of them individually, or you can, if you're nimble enough with your fingers, you can put the pair on at the same time. And just lock that into place. Try to get them as close to even as you possibly can. And when you get that locked down, then you can wrap forward all the way up to behind the lead wire. And then you can snip off the excess. Now the next thing that you're going to attach here would be your wire. Now this is silver wire, or not wire, but tinsel, excuse me. And what you have is two-sided. One side is gold, one side is silver. So when you tie this in, you want to tie the gold side up. Just bring that up to behind that wire. You let that hang off the back. The next material that you're going to use is the peacock herl. This is going to be your abdomen. You take 3 or 4 pieces of peacock herl. Trim off the butts. Lay this down so that the end of that is even with the back of the lead wire. Now there's a couple different ways to put on this peacock herl. I'll do one, but I'll tell you about the others. Sometimes, and you bring that back up to your ending point where you had tied in your wire. That's you're going to do on all your patterns and all your work. Always end at that same spot so that you don't have different areas. Now, one of the things that you could do is you could pull these down and wrap them around your thread, and then wrap it that way. That makes it very, very strong. Or you could just wrap them individually without the thread, as a group, not individually. And one of the things that you could do, you could bring that thread all the way up to the end, but one of the preferred ways would be to wrap and move, touching turns, bring that up, and then you get to your thread, and then wrap behind your thread and pull that forward, and then that thread will help create a little bit of a bulk, which adds to the taper of the fly. And you want to bring that up so you're about 2/3 up the hook. Anchor that down, tie it off. And you can snip or cut or tear, whatever your preference. Lock that down. Excuse me. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take your ribbing and you're going to wrap that, separate the turns, bring that up, anchor it off. I'm slipping. Back end of the scissors. Nail that down pretty good. Next we're going to put on the wing case, and for the wing case we're going to use pheasant tail fibers. You notice on the pheasant tails one side is softer and one side is a lot stiffer. We're going to use several of the stiffer fibers, about 7 or 8 of them.
Show the camera. Right over top of your hook.
Okay.
Right.
I can't see.
Over your hook. There you go.
All right. I'll get used to this in another couple years. It's like shaving in a mirror. Well, I don't want to tell that story. But I'll tell the story. Give you something to chuckle about. Several years ago, I was down at camp. I got out of the shower and had a big full mirror on the wall. So I was toweling off, and I happened to look at my back, and I got a tick right in the middle of my back between my shoulder blades. Okay, how do you get that off? Try to reach it, can't reach it. Okay, I'll light a cigar and I'll burn it off. I'll heat it off so it'll drop off. So I couldn't get with the cigar, so I got my hemostat off my fishing vest and then hooked it onto the cigar, which gave me more room. Now I'm standing in the kitchen or in the bathroom looking in the mirror with my back turned and my arm up behind me with a hemostat and a lit cigar, trying to get that tick off the middle of my back. And you ever see a target when somebody shoots and they get a nice tight grouping of bullet holes? That's what my back looks like from all those burns from that damn cigar. So I wouldn't suggest that. I would say call a neighbor, call a friend to get that tick off your back. Don't do what I did. So much for that. All right. You take these pheasant tail fibers, lock them down, bring that back, and slipping. And you're going to bring that back to about a third, because you want to make room for the wing case there. Okay, now the next step is we're going to put the partridge feather on, which is going to be the legs. And you want to get a relatively small one. Prepping this is pretty important as to, is that showing up?
Right over the eye of the hook. Yep.
There we go. Okay. So you're going to pull off these fuzzies. Oh, there's two feathers there. Pull those fibers back. And then leave it like that. And what you're going to do is take your scissors and trim this feather. You want to leave a little bit of a triangle at the end. So you're going to cut this off. And then lay this feather down with the dull side facing up. So you set that on top. And wrap that in. Okay, now, if when you tie this, if you're going to use a bead, obviously the bead would be up here already in place, so you would work everything behind that bead. So your spacing would be a little bit different. It would be a little bit farther back, because you have to have, the next thing you're gonna do is you have to put in a thorax. So you use the same dubbing that you did for the back end. I'm gonna wax this a little bit. Maybe. It's frozen. There we go. Well, that's shot. It's frozen solid and the plastic broke, so we won't do that. Make a noodle, and this will be significantly bigger than the one that you did for the back end. These bugs, whether it's a mayfly or a stonefly, the proportions, the thorax is always bigger than the abdomen, so it's just something that you get used to. Okay, so that's a little bit bigger, so we're in good shape. Now what you're going to do is you're going to pull over the legs, that partridge feather, use that stem, and smooth the fibers back. Lay that stem over the top. One loose turn and then tight turns. Now you take your pheasant tail for your wing case that you had. Pull that up over the top of the legs of that partridge feather. And you can kind of play with them to get them to splay back. Take a loose and then tight. Bring your thread around the front, the back. Trim that off. And tighten up, make a neat head. I'm noticing as I'm working here that I'm having trouble with this bobbin because it slips. So as I'm pulling, it's not giving me the right tension that I want. And I don't know what your preference is at home. But investing in a good bobbin really makes life a little bit easier. I'm noticing that right now. I think that you can bend this and it'll tighten it up a little bit. But I have different bobbins at home that are adjustable and it makes life easier. And then you whip finish and you're good to go. And that's it. That's a 20-incher stonefly. Now these legs aren't exactly the way I wanted them. They're a little bit on the long side. But there you go.
Yeah.
Any questions on that?
How did you separate the tail? Did you just pull them apart, or did you wind the dubbing ball?
I put a dubbing ball,
Okay.
and then if your fingers are working, which mine aren't this morning.